Today is the culmination of a week's worth of trade deadline shows. We're going to talk prospects, and then we're going to take those prospects and make some trades to turn the Mets into a World Series contender.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, this show is going to take everything I've been talking about for the last 3 days, looking at the bats on the market, the starting pitchers, the relievers, and putting it all together in one show where we are going to finish by making some mock trades that will make the New York Mets a World Series contender. But first, we got to talk about what's on the table. Which prospects do the Mets have that could fetch something big at the deadline, and which guys should be completely untouchable, and that's where we're going to start. To me, there's one. No doubt about it, untouchable. The New York Mets should not be trading this player under any circumstance right now. It's last year's first-round pick, Carson Benge. Carson Benge has hit the ground running in his first full professional season. He put up great numbers in Brooklyn, despite the fact that that's a very tough ballpark to hit, especially for a left-handed hitter. Gets up to Double-A. So far, it's been 13 games, but he has played very well so far at Binghamton, and you could envision a world where Carson Benge is up next year and is the starting center fielder of the New York Mets. He has 5-tool potential. That's just not a guy that the Mets should be trading under any circumstance. Now, the other untouchable, to me, you could say all of the top pitching prospects, Noel McLean, Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat. There's a clear top tier in this farm system when it comes to the pitching prospects. But I would not say that they're all untouchable. I would say 2 out of 3 are, and I'm not going to get specific on which ones. I mean, if I was to tell you which ones I like the most, it's tough. I'd probably lean Jonah Tong and Nolan McLean right now, but I also think that that's partially recency bias because coming into the season, I would have said Brandon Sproat is the most untouchable. So I really don't have a definitive answer on which one should be the most untouchable of the 3. But what I would say is, if you're going to move one, that's it. There's no world where the Mets should move 2 of those 3 at this deadline, and they probably should try to hang on to those 3 because that could be the future of your rotation, along with Christian Scott coming off Tommy John. So those are the 4 prospects that, in my eyes, are the most untouchable. But again, if you're going to shoot for the stars, and some of the guys we've talked about on these shows this week when it came to the starting pitchers, if you're going to get an ace with control like Joe Ryan, you might have to put one of your top pitching prospects on the table. If you're going to get Jhoan Duran and get a lights-out closer type to be a Robin to Edwin Diaz's Batman, and in that case, you probably have 2 Batman. It might be Batman and Superman in the bullpen. You might have to give up one of those top pitching prospects. And if you're going to go for a center fielder, and if the Red Sox are actually going to shop Jhoan Duran, which is still unclear because they won 10 in a row going into the break, they might just try to win this year, but they also could make a trade where they give up Duran and get a piece that helps them. We'll talk about that more in the final segment, but you're probably going to have to put one of those top pitching prospects on the table, or you might have to. So that is my caveat on the top pitching prospects. You can give up one of the 3, but no more, and preferably you hang on to all of them. Now we get into a guy that is nearly untouchable. But if you're getting one of those players I talked about, a star reliever, a star, in your lineup with control, and a guy like Duran, or again, an ace type or a bullpen ace, I would maybe consider putting Jet Williams on the table, but I'd be very hesitant to because he has a ridiculously high floor. Depending on who you ask, Jet Williams or Carson Benge could be the best pitching, or the best pitching prospect, the best overall prospect in this system. Those 2 guys are really, really talented. With Jet Williams, I think the floor is probably the highest of any prospect in the system. I can tell you that Jet Williams will be a big leaguer. He's going to be able to defend well. He's got speed. So he's got this sort of speed utility outlook that could be similar to what we're seeing with Luis Angel Acuna, but just a much safer bat. I mean, a guy that has great plate discipline. I think he's going to get into more power than you expect. I would not want to trade Jet Williams, but in the right deal, if it's a trade to win the World Series, I could be talked into it. Ryan Clifford and Jacob Reimer are the other two prospects, along with Jet Williams, that I would say are untouchable if it's a rental. I'm not giving up the power potential of a Ryan Clifford or a Jacob Reimer for a rental. Now, again, if you're shooting for the stars, maybe you put those guys on the table. Now, when it comes to prospects that move the needle, these are guys, we're going to talk about pitchers in the next segment. So position player prospects that I believe will move the needle. And I'm not going to go all the way down to the absolute lowest levels. This is not a time to trade Elian Pena, the guy the Mets got who they spent the $5 million bonus on, or Giovanni Rodriguez. Like, we're talking about guys who are performing right now in primarily, I don't even think I have a low A bat on here. So high A, double A, triple A. Drew Gilbert could certainly be moved. He's a close to the big leagues prospect who I think might have a fourth outfielder ceiling potentially, but he's one of those guys that does everything well. Not a great fielder, but a good fielder. Not a great runner, but a good runner. Not a great base stealer, but he can swipe some. Doesn't have the most power, but there is power in there. So he does a lot of things well, but his sort of best outlook is sort of 45 to 50 grades on all of his tools, just like being good at everything, but not great at anything. And I think ultimately that might be a fourth outfielder. So that's definitely a guy that you could put on the table. But if a team needs bats, as we'll get into soon, and wants bats close to the big league level, a AAA outfielder who's swinging it pretty well lately could make some sense. AJ Ewing has had a very good season in Brooklyn, 767 OPS, 41 stolen bases. I always like to mention that AJ Ewing was the comp pick the Mets got for Jacob deGrom signing with the Rangers. He hit really well last year in the Florida Complex League, showcased a lot of power, got out to St. Lucie last year. This year was outstanding in St. Lucie and earned a promotion up to high A. Did really well in the beginning. I think he's fading a little bit, but still he's put up good numbers, and that is a center fielder potentially that teams would be very interested in. Another one along a similar type of build is Nick Morabito. Nick Morabito is just a level above AJ Ewing right now. He's got a 785 OPS, hitting 290, 33 stolen bases. Morabito could definitely draw some interest. Again, though, kind of a different player because he's got more speed and probably a little bit higher of a ceiling defensively than a Drew Gilbert. But another guy where you wonder, all right, in the big leagues, is he a starter or is he a fourth outfielder? I think you could feel pretty good that Nick Morabito is going to be a big leaguer, and that's not always something that you could say about prospects. So I think he would move the needle, but I would be willing to move him. Colin Houck, maybe you're selling high on a good run through low A this year. He definitely improved. Now he's struggling in high A. My guess is not going to be a ton of value for Colin Houck at this deadline. He was the Mets' first round pick a couple years ago. I think he's a guy that is still raw enough. I think you want to develop him further, but it's worth mentioning. There might be teams that are in love with Colin Houck, and I would not, be hesitant to move him if that was the difference in getting a trade done that I really wanted. Jesus Baez is another name to mention. 762 OPS in high A now, 9 home runs. It's not easy to leave the yard there in Brooklyn. Shortstop prospect that probably ends up at third base long term, but he has been playing shortstop again this year. So that's definitely another name to mention. Chris Suero has had a good season in Brooklyn, kind of a toolsy catcher. 837 OPS this year, 25 stolen bases, 13 home runs. He might have some value on the market. Eli Serrano, the Mets' 4th-round pick last year. Another guy that's pretty toolsy in the outfield. Left-handed bat, so I look at his numbers, which is a 748 OPS, and he hasn't left the yard too much there in Brooklyn, and I think part of that can be playing in that ballpark, but he's definitely a guy that I think teams would be very interested in. And then when we're talking about trades and what the Mets should put on the table, what we're going to continue to discuss here as we get into the mocks, I think the Mets are in a position now where they should be looking to move one of their big league infielders. And that's going to be, I think, the biggest thing that David Stern's going to have to figure out the deadline. This is not about your prospects. This is about your big league roster right now. You have 4 infielders that are on the roster that are all either out of options or running out of options. Mark Vientos, out of options. Brett Beatty, if he spends 20 days in the minor leagues this year, he'll be out of options. believe he spent like 9. You have Ronnie Mauricio and Luis Acuna both with 17 days spent in the minor leagues this year. Once either of those guys gets to 20, they'll be out of options too. So you have those 4 guys, and continuing to roster them year over year over year is going to be tough, and you have to sort of pick a direction. So trading one of those guys makes sense. And another guy that I think has trade value at this deadline, only problem is whether you can move a guy that's hurt, is Tylor Megill. Before Tylor Megill went down, I thought he was actually one of the Mets' best trade chips because there's 2 years of control after this season, and he was in the middle of kind of a career year. I don't know if teams will be interested, but we might talk about him a little bit later on. What I want to go through next, though, as we transition to pitching, the New York Mets have a lot of it, and I'm not even just talking about those top 3 arms. They have a bunch of pitching under those guys that can get pretty much any rental trade done and can be the ancillary pieces around some of these guys we just talked about that can get some big trades done as well. So I want to talk about some of the pitching prospects the Mets can move here. We'll get into that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute that you and your friends or family want to go out to the ballpark and catch a game? Well, that's exactly where Game Time comes in. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for exciting upcoming MLB games. Also, you got concerts, comedy shows. Sometimes, if I'm bored on the weekend, I pull up in the Game Time app, I look at what's live near me, and I just see what I could potentially go to and get out of the house. Game Time is the place to go for all of your entertainment needs. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our goal of 14,000 subscribers. If you're liking the video, throw a like on it and leave me a comment. Which mock trade, when we get to them, do you like the best? Which prospect would you absolutely not trade under any circumstance? Let's talk pitching now. Obviously, Jonah Thong, Nolan McLean, Brandon Sproat, those guys are going to move the needle in any trade. They can be the headliners, but you probably don't want to move any of them. And to do that, you're going to have to trade some other pitching. Luckily, the Mets have a lot of pitching to deal. Blade Tidwell could absolutely be moved. 80 strikeouts and 71 and 2/3 innings pitched in AAA, now a 4.40 ERA. Had a good final start of the first half as well. I think he went 5 1/3 scoreless. Don't quote me on that exactly. I didn't put it in my notes, but he definitely did close out the first half on a good note. He is close to the big leagues. He's on a 40-man roster. I think teams would look at Blade Tidwell and say, all right, there's a chance that this guy could be a starting pitcher for us. There's also a really good reliever in here. If you stick him in the bullpen, let that fastball play up a little bit along with the sweeper, and maybe there's something there. So I think Tidwell would definitely be a piece that can move the needle some trades. Then you got, if you're just talking about AAA, a couple of relievers. You have one that's actually on the big league roster right now, and then one that is dominating right now in his first 8 innings in AAA and had a really good run throughout the season, throws super hard. That's Dylan Ross, 1.13 ERA and 8 innings pitched in AAA, 12 strikeouts. Alex Carrillo is on the big league roster. These are guys that you likely want to hang on to, but sometimes if you're trading for that top tier closer, a team might want a potential, relief pitcher that could pop and could become a late inning reliever for them, if not a closer. And so if you have to get the guy that can help you win a World Series now, those are guys you can still put on the table. AA. I'm just going to run through a bunch of names. Jack Wenninger, 3.01 ERA, 107 strikeouts, and 86 and 2/3 innings pitched. Zach Thornton, left-handed pitcher, 2.60 ERA in 10 starts in AA. Jonathan Santucci, another left-handed pitcher who just got called up to AA, had a good first start. He pitched lights out at the end of his tenure in Brooklyn. That's why he got promoted. Mets second-round pick last year. RJ Gordon, he also has had a really good run this season, been very consistent in Brooklyn, now up in AA. So right there, those are all starting pitchers in AA who have performed well this year. You have Anthony Nunez, who It's another guy kind of similar to Dylan Ross or Alex Carrillo. He's just still in AA. 56 strikeouts and 34 and 2/3 innings pitched, a 1.30 ERA. In high A, you got Noah Hall. He's got a 2.41 ERA and 78 and a third innings pitched with 82 strikeouts. Brandon Girton has a 2.69 ERA and 60 and a third innings pitched with 73 strikeouts. Nate Dome has a 3.12 ERA between low A and high A, 71 Ks and 57 and 2/3 innings pitched. Will Watson, a 3.21 ERA between low A and high A, 80 strikeouts and 70 innings. Wellington Aracena, a 20-year-old in low A with a 2.56 ERA and 77 strikeouts and 59 and 2/3 innings pitched. And then you have a couple of relievers in high A. Sal Garcia has 47 Ks and 25 and a third innings pitched with a 2.13 ERA. Then you have Ryan Ammons, sort of a funky lefty, with 36 Ks and 25 and 2/3 innings pitched with a 0.86 whip. Also, Ramon Gomez, who I think, what was that? He hit like 104 on the radar gun or 105. He throws incredible gas. All of that, counting all those arms up. And there's more. I mean, if I really wanted to dive deeper, we could find probably at least another few to add into the mix. That's 13 pitchers outside of the top three of Tong, McLean, and Sproat. So the point is, the New York Mets have an absolute surplus of pitching in their farm system. And that is what they can use to shop. They can shop Reynolds with those arms. And they did that last year. All of the trades basically were 1-for-1s. Oh, you want to get Tyler Zuber, bad trade, by the way, from the Rays. Give up a minor league reliever in Eric Gores. You want to get Jesse Winker, Tyler Stewart, a starting pitcher at the time. I believe he was in AA. They traded him. Want to get Ryan Stanek, a guy who was in AAA, performing pretty well. Rylan Thomas, sort of a fourth outfielder build. 1-for-1s. And for a lot of them, it was a pitching prospect going for a guy, or again, there was one outfielder for a reliever. So when you look at what the Mets might try to do at the deadline, I think that is going to be the place that they're going to start all of their conversations. They're going to start with their pitching that's not the top guys. And I mean, they're probably going to try to stay away from, a Jack Wenninger or a Zach Thornton in AA as well. But at a certain point, depending on who you're trying to get, you would start to put those guys on the table. They have so much pitching, particularly in high A right now. Just a lot of different names, and obviously all these teams have scouts. There's a good chance when there's 13 to probably, even closer to 16, 17 arms, especially if you include the top three. But I mean, excluding the top three, when you have this many arms that are performing well, I mean, there's going to be some scouts that like what they see, and that's going to give you a lot of capital at this deadline. So I think what the Mets should be looking at, if they're trying to get an elite bullpen arms we've talked about, potentially a guy that can start a playoff game, and then that perfect bat, whoever it is, to complete this lineup, I think they have to decide where they want to do the blockbuster deal, whether that's you want to get the arm that's going to complete the rotation, if you want to get that relief ace that we talked about on yesterday's show, or if there is a bat, particularly one with control like a Jhoan Duran, that really jumps out to you. I think you put together one blockbuster package where you might put a Jet Williams on the table, or you might put one of those top overall pitching prospects on the table. And then for the other ancillary pieces, you use that pitching surplus to shop. And I think if the Mets can pull that off, there is a world where they might be able to come out of this deadline with everything they need without giving up those top pitching prospects, potentially without giving up a Jet Williams. And I also really do believe that the Mets might have the perfect trade chip on their roster right now. I want to talk about that next, and we will also be getting into the mock trades that I have that will make the New York Mets a World Series contender. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. And get the live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, I believe Ronnie Mauricio might just be the New York Mets' best and most expendable trade chip at the deadline. I don't mean most expendable as in just move him. What I mean is he might move the needle more and be more expendable than any other piece the Mets have. The combination of you can get by without Ronnie Mauricio, and he might be able to fetch you a lot, because what Ronnie Mauricio has on his side when it comes to being a trade chip is the unknown. He's a 6'4" shortstop. I think he might be bigger than 6'4", to be completely honest, but listed at 6'4", 166, and no one's buying the 166 on that. He's a switch hitting shortstop that can play second and third, and has shown ability to play those two positions so far in his young big league career at a pretty high level. Could he actually be an everyday big league shortstop? The jury's definitely out. He certainly hasn't gotten that opportunity with the Mets, and he won't get that opportunity with the Mets. But the more that I was thinking about trades the Mets can make, every single trade partner could use a Ronnie Mauricio, because all of these teams, for the most part, have a need for bats. And typically, they're going to want bats that are closer to the big league level. Ronnie Mauricio can get plugged into whatever team he gets traded to immediately. If you want to get Jhoan Duran, and they're still trying to win this year, they have Willie Abreu, Ceddanne Rafaela, they have Roman Anthony. That's their outfield of the future. Okay, well, what's in the infield? Ronnie Mauricio could solve their needs at second base, at shortstop, at third, depending on where they feel they have the most needs. Now, obviously, when Trevor Story and Alex Bregman are healthy, that's going to be their left side of the infield this year, it seems, because Story has certainly picked it up. But Mauricio could be their second baseman. He can fill in at DH. He can be a utility guy off the bench. And he would give you a guy that, with his power, could do really well in the American League East. Look at the Pirates. What do they need? If you're going to get Bednar, they need bats. They need close to the big league bats so they can try to win with Paul Skeens. O'Neill Cruz and Ronnie Mauricio on the same team, that sounds like a lot of fun. The Twins, if you're going to get Joe Ryan or Jhoan Duran, what do they need? They need some bats. And they can use some depth in their infield, because a lot of their infielders typically are injury prone. Now, that's another guy that is coming off an ACL, but hey, I think teams will look at Ronnie Mauricio and see his upside, and they might be more intrigued by Mauricio as a trade chip than Brett Baty, who might have a little bit more of a limited ceiling, or Mark Vientos, who might be a little bit limited defensively when it comes to where they can place him. Whereas Mauricio, you're looking at versatile, you're looking at high upside bat who hits the ball really hard, switch hitter, and someone that you can dream on. You might not be able to dream as much about Acuna, Baty, Vientos. And when it comes to the Mets trying to win this year, I can find a defined role for everybody but Mauricio. Brett Baty, second base, third base. He could start at either spot. Defensively, he's been really solid, and the at-bats have been getting better. Mauricio, yeah, the at-bats are solid right now. He's definitely flashing more earlier in his career than any of these other guys did. At the same time, these other guys have so much more big league experience. When I'm talking about Baty and Vientos in particular. Like, one thing that we forget about is we forget about the value of big league experience, big league at-bats, big league innings under your belt. And when you're trying to win now, having these guys that have gone through the ups and the downs, they might be more suited for a contender to win now. Mark Vientos has thrived on the biggest stage. If Mauricio and Vientos have similar trade value right now, the more I think about it, if you want to win this season, keep Vientos' bat. Well, Brett Baty has gone through all these struggles. It finally seems like he's turned a corner. But if he's turned the corner to just be a solid utility guy, what is that going to get you on the market compared to somebody that might believe that Ronnie Mauricio is their shortstop of the future? So the more I think about it, trading Ronnie Mauricio might be the exact thing to do, because it might protect you from having to give up a Jet Williams or one of those top pitching prospects, because he might have that value to get a deal done. So then we talk about mock trades. And I want to start with what I think is the most important part of this roster to address. You might be surprised by this, but I think where the Mets should be shooting for the stars is getting an elite relief pitcher. Getting somebody that makes the end of games a nightmare for opposing teams. I think it sets everything in line. If you get a true number 2 to Edwin Diaz, now Reed Garrett is that much more valuable. Now Jose Buda, Ryan Stanek, all these guys, Brooks Raley, they just move down the pecking order, and your entire bullpen gets that much better. I looked at recent closer trades. So Josh Hader got traded. What David Stearns got back for Josh Hader a couple years ago was Taylor Rogers, who was supposed to be the fill-in closer so that team would just keep on winning, which that obviously did not work. They got Robert Gasser, a top pitching prospect who debuted last year, pitched to a 2.57 ERA in 5 starts before going down with Tommy John surgery, but clearly a really highly touted top pitching prospect. And Esteury Ruiz, who'd been flipped a couple times, ended up being flipped again. I think that might have been the first time he was traded. But Esteury Ruiz was a guy that was stealing a ton of bases, a top position player prospect, and he ended up turning into William Contreras. And then Dinelson Lamet was in that deal, but he was cut right after, if I'm not mistaken. So really, if you look at the package for a year and a half of Josh Hader, it was a top-end pitching prospect and a top 10 in a system position player prospect, and then a stopgap closer. The Devin Williams trade this offseason, which was 1 year of control. It was Nestor Cortez and Caleb Durbin. Caleb Durbin, one good position player prospect, Cortez, a plug-and-play big league starter. Andrew Miller trade back in 2016. It was Clint Frazier, Justice Sheffield, and then a couple of arms that went the other way as well, Ben Heller and JP Fireheisen. But really, the prize of that trade for the Yankees was Clint Frazier and Justice Sheffield, a top hitting prospect, a top pitching prospect at the time. They were 2 of the 3 top prospects in the then Indian system. That was 2.5 years of control. So now as we look toward Jhoan Duran, the starting point would probably be a top hitting prospect, a top pitching prospect, and maybe an MLB piece. So I was thinking about what the trade could be. If Ronnie Mauricio is the MLB piece and you want to protect your top pitching prospects, then maybe it is one of those other arms. We'll say it's Jonathan Santucci, and maybe you have to give up Jet Williams to get this trade done. Now, that's a lot to give up Jet, Ronnie Mauricio, and Jonathan Santucci. But you'd be getting a elite closer for 2.5 years. Plus, I think you could get Willie Castro thrown into that trade as well. So you check off 2 boxes. You get a bat, and Willie Castro is a switch hitter that could replace Mauricio on the roster. He's got a 364 on-base percentage the last time I checked from both the left and the right side. He's going to give you more power, and he's going to hit for a higher average from the right side, but he's going to draw his walks from the left side. Just a really functional player that's a rental, but he could really help a winning team. And then again, of course, Duran is the prize of that trade. You could take that same package and potentially get a Joe Ryan, which would give you a new ace atop your rotation or another ace, with Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea looking pretty good over this past weekend. You could take that same package and maybe put on the table for Jhoan Duran and see where that gets you. I think for a Jhoan Duran and maybe even a Joe Ryan, you might have to give up one of those top pitching prospects, but there's also a world where you can give up one of those top pitching prospects, Ronnie Mauricio, and then a tertiary piece to get one of these top-end guys. So that's where Ronnie Mauricio is really intriguing, because he can fill a spot that would allow you to protect a blue chip prospect. Now, let's talk about the reliever trade that I really like, though. Because while I would love Duran, I think the cost might be a little bit prohibitive, and it might not be that much more worth it instead of just going for David Bednar, who has a year and a half of control. So the package will be a little bit less. And Bednar has been lights out this year. He's striking out, the last I checked, like 37% of the batters that he's facing. He's all the way back. So if you were to get Bednar, I think you can pull off this trade by giving them 2 bats, the Pirates, that can be part of the 2026 Pirates. So Ronnie Mauricio and Drew Gilbert, I think, moves the needle in a Bednar trade. Now, you still probably have to throw an arm in there. But all of a sudden, compared to Duran, you might be able to keep a Jet Williams. You might be able to keep all of your top pitching prospects. Where Ronnie Mauricio could headline a Bednar trade similar to how Caleb Durbin headlined a Devin Williams trade. I don't think that's outside of the realm of possibilities at all. So let's lock that trade in as a possibility. I like that one a lot. Here's another trade that I really like. That's getting a Eugenio Suarez and Merrill Kelly. If you pull off this trade, you're plugging in Suarez at third base. Mark Vientos can become your DH if you keep him in the deal. Beatty can be your second baseman and still sub in for Suarez for defense late. And you keep doing the Jeff McNeil, Tyrone Taylor thing in center field. Because if you look at the center field market, we talked about on the Bat Show, you got a couple of flyers you could take on Luis Robert, Cedric Mullins, and then you got Duran. And who knows if Duran's even going to get traded from the Red Sox. So if center field becomes too hard of a position to add, getting the best possible bat on the table is the way to go. And I think Suarez is that. So again, I think you could put Ronnie Mauricio on the table, add in a Blade Tidwell, and you might be able to get Suarez and Merrill Kelly. Merrill Kelly, has this year, last I checked, 3.44 ERA. You're looking at a guy that has consistently done that, pitch to a sub 3.5 ERA, and was amazing in the Diamondbacks' run to the World Series in 2023. And I think with the amount of control that you'd be trading for rentals with a Ronnie Mauricio, you could nearly get that deal done. You just throw an arm in on top of it to make it all happen, a 2-for-2. These are the trades that I think Ronnie Mauricio can open up for the New York Mets, where you can hang on to Jet Williams and Carson Benge and all these guys. Now, obviously, in two of these mocks here, all these mocks are putting Ronnie Mauricio in them. There's obviously other prospects you can plug in instead of Mauricio. Teams would love Jacob Reimer. So you very well could trade Jacob Reimer and Blade Tidwell and probably get a Suarez and a Kelly. The only reason why I think the Mets would be better served hanging on to Jacob Reimer, a third base prospect, over Ronnie Mauricio, who could be your third baseman right now, is because I think it's going to be hard to roster all those young infielders for the next couple years. And you sort of you're playing to two different timelines by keeping a Reimer because he's in Double-A, because you might still have a full year of development with him before he's ready for the show. And it just gives you, some more options down the line. Just to further illustrate the Ronnie Mauricio value, I think you trade Ronnie Mauricio for Seth Lugo straight up. I think the Royals would do it. And that would give you an ace, another guy that you can plug towards the top of that rotation. And who knows what Ronnie Mauricio is going to become? He might be amazing. He might be a future All-Star. Or he might be a guy, I think it's more likely that he is a guy that can pop 30 home runs in a given season and he might have an All-Star season. I don't think he's going to be a perennial All-Star. And I don't even know if he's going to be an above-average contributor long-term because he is a guy that I think has some holes in his swing that can get exposed the more he's in the show. And like I mentioned, we have seen the peaks and valleys of young players. It happens. And so I always love when fans are ready to ship out all the young players and get ready for the prospects, when then you're just resetting the clock on waiting for these guys. I think the Mets have put more time into Vientos and Beatty, and that's why Mauricio might make more sense to move than those guys, especially if his trade value is higher. So what should the Mets do with this year's trade deadline? If you've been listening all week, there's a lot of options on the table. I would make sure that you get a really lights out arm for that bullpen. And I think you got to solve that puzzle that is your lineup right now. I think pulling one of those infielders out, whether it's Vientos or Mauricio, I think those are the two that are most likely to be moved. I think Beatty is so valuable to this team with his defense and where he's gotten his bat, and I don't think he's going to be as valuable on the market to other teams as he is to the Mets. And I think Acuna might not have that incredible value on the market, but he is just a guy for a winning team that you can see at the end of the Mets bench for the next 5 years. And he could still end up being the second baseman of the future, but his floor right now of just being this guy that wins you games with speed and defense, I think that's more valuable to the Mets. So again, Mauricio or Vientos could certainly be on the move at this deadline to help you get one of these pieces that you need. And by trading one of them, you sort of clear the picture for your infield. And then it's figuring out what you're doing with Jeff McNeil. Are you committing to Jeff McNeil, the center fielder this year? Where, of course, you're going to spare him throughout the season to get him to the playoffs with Tyrone Taylor. And Tyrone Taylor just gives you a good floor option out there because worst case scenario, Tyrone Taylor was the starting center fielder on the playoff run last year. You can just have his defense out there. If the rest of the lineup is good enough, it doesn't matter. But figuring out what they're going to do with McNeil. Is he in center field or is he at second base? And then what bat can they bring in that complements this roster? Is it a Willie Castro type that just gives you another utility guy that can plug in everywhere? Is it a third baseman with a ton of power like a Eugenio Suarez? Or are you big game hunting for a center fielder with Byron Buxton and Jhoan Duran being the two guys that would be dreams, but they're going to cost a lot to get them? I think the Mets should try to make one monster trade at this deadline. I think there should be one blockbuster that blows our mind, whether that's getting an arm in that bullpen that we all sort of have that jaw-dropping moment of, oh my gosh, they got him and Edwin Diaz now, whether that is pulling off one of these trades to get a bat that really moves the needle, or if it is ultimately looking for the best possible starting pitcher to plug into that rotation. But the thing is, the Mets have the capital to do all of it. And if they aren't shopping at the absolute top of the market, they have the pitching to get an arm for their bullpen, get an arm for their rotation, and get some type of a bat that fits the mix without giving up Jet Williams, Carson Benge, or any of those top 3 pitching prospects. Those are the 5 guys that I'm keeping to the vest the closest at this deadline. Jonah Tong, Nolan McLean, Brandon Sproat, Carson Benge, and Jet Williams. But you got to try to win a World Series. And so hopefully the New York Mets are aggressive at this deadline and make some big moves so that they can actually win it all this year. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets, and that'll also wrap up all of my pre-recorded shows. It was fun taking you all through a guide of where I see the Mets at right now for this trade deadline. Doesn't mean I'm going away for the rest of the week, though. I just will be gone on the video side of things. I'll be posting audio-only shows from my vacation to close out the week here, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, recapping all of the games. So, well, for your Friday show, for your show tomorrow, it'll be priming you for the second half and then recapping the games throughout the rest of the weekend. And beyond that, I also wanted to mention, too, the draft was tonight as I'm recording this, the first round. So I'm going to be doing a full draft show next week. There's some really great draft experts we have at Just Baseball. I think I'll get one of them on the show to sort of run me through the entire draft for the Mets. So that is all for your Locked On Mets content right now. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. You can follow me on social media, Finkelstein Ryan. If you're watching on YouTube, again, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first watch or your first listen every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today, the show that's streaming 24/7 on YouTube, giving you access to all the latest in the world of sports with our local experts for each team, league experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.